In the harsh plains of Wyoming Territory, mercy was as rare as rain. Sarah Miller's world crumbled when a riding accident left her paralyzed and pregnant, unable to contribute to the settlement's backbreaking labor. They cast her out without a second thought, leaving her to crawl along the dusty trail as the summer sun beat down mercilessly. Hours stretched into days as she inched forward, hope fading with each painful movement. Just as her strength failed, providence arrived in the form of James Cooper, a wealthy rancher returning from the cattle market. He found her collapsed form, barely breathing, and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. What he didn't know was that this broken woman would become the heart of his sprawling ranch, and perhaps his heart as well. What secret talent will she bring to the ranch that transforms everything? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 2 months earlier, Sarah Miller had stood tall among the women of Harmony Settlement, her silver pocket watch marking the rhythm of their shared labor. The timepiece, a wedding gift from her late husband Thomas, had survived their arduous journey west when so much else was lost. Each morning, its gentle ticking guided her through the routines that kept their isolated community alive, feeding chickens, tending gardens, preserving food for the bitter Wyoming winters. That spring morning began like any other. Sarah's quick hands worked the butter churn, while Margaret, the midwife, examined her growing belly. "Strong heartbeat," the older woman had smiled, patting Sarah's hand. "Thomas would have been so proud." The words brought both comfort and pain. Thomas had been gone just 6 months, taken by fever before he could know about their child. The settlement's council had been surprisingly supportive after Thomas's death, allowing Sarah to maintain their homestead alone. She'd proven her worth tenfold, organizing the community storehouse and teaching the children to read by candlelight. Even Elder Harrison, known for his stern judgment of unmarried women, had praised her resilience. Sarah paused in her work, one hand resting on her watch's smooth surface, as she gazed across the settlement's neatly arranged buildings. The morning sun caught the fresh painted white of the meeting house, where she'd first arrived as Thomas's bride 2 years ago. Everything had seemed possible then, their dreams as vast as the Wyoming sky. The accident happened that afternoon. Wild Bill's new stallion, a magnificent but untamed creature, had broken free from the corral. Sarah saw him heading straight for the children's play area, where little Emma Watson sat making mud pies, oblivious to the danger. Without thinking, Sarah ran forward, her skirts gathered in her hands. She managed to snatch Emma to safety, but the stallion's powerful shoulder caught her squarely in the back as it thundered past. The pain was immediate and absolute. Sarah felt something snap inside her, and the world went dark around the edges. When she awoke 3 days later in Margaret's care, she couldn't feel her legs. The midwife's face told her everything before a word was spoken. "The baby," Sarah had whispered, "still with us, praise the Lord." But Sarah, Margaret's weathered hand squeezed hers. "The damage to your spine. You may never walk again." The settlement's reaction changed gradually, like winter frost creeping across a window pane. The first week brought casseroles and sympathetic visits. The second week, whispers began. By the third week, when Sarah still couldn't rise from her bed, Elder Harrison called a council meeting. Sarah's pocket watch ticked steadily on her bedside table as Margaret reported the council's decision. The settlement couldn't support those who couldn't contribute. They'd give her 2 weeks to arrange transport to her distant relatives in Ohio, if she had any. The unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. They all knew Sarah had no family left. "But the baby," Sarah protested, one hand pressed protectively against her swelling belly. "I can still work. I can teach, keep records they've already given." "The teaching position to Elder Harrison's daughter," Margaret said softly. "I tried to speak for you, but The following days brought the systematic dismantling of Sarah's life. Her carefully tended garden was redistributed. Her preserved foods were added to the community stores. Her furniture was auctioned off to pay for medical expenses. Through it all, her pocket watch kept time, marking each hour that brought her closer to exile. The morning they came to escort her out, Sarah clutched the watch in one trembling hand. Elder Harrison stood in her doorway, his shadow falling across her bed like judgment. "The wagon to take you to Fort Laramie leaves at noon," he announced. "The settlement has been more than generous." "There is no wagon," Sarah said quietly. She'd overheard 2 council members the day before. No one had bothered to arrange transport. "Then you'll need to make your own arrangements." The elder's voice held no trace of the man who'd once praised her strength. "We'll need the house cleared by sundown." They left her by the trail, her few remaining possessions in a small bundle beside her. The pocket watch, when she pulled it out one last time, had finally stopped ticking. Sarah tucked it into her dress pocket anyway, a final reminder of the life she'd lost. Ahead lay 20 miles of open country to the next settlement. Behind her, Harmony's gates closed with a decisive thud. Using her arms, Sarah began to drag herself forward. She had no choice. Her baby kicked inside her, a reminder that she wasn't fighting for herself alone. The summer sun climbed higher, and the dust of the trail coated her throat. But inch by inch, she moved forward, leaving behind the community that had once been her home, her silver pocket watch heavy against her heart. The first mile took Sarah until sunset. Her arms trembled with each forward pull, her woolen shawl, Thomas's last Christmas gift, catching and tearing on the rocky ground. The rough trail shredded her palms, but she barely noticed the pain. It was nothing compared to the hollow absence below her waist, the betrayal of limbs that had once carried her proudly across these same plains. As darkness fell, she pulled herself beneath a scraggly sage bush. The summer night was mild, but she wrapped the torn shawl tightly around her shoulders, trying to hold on to what remained of its warmth. Above her, stars emerged one by one, the same stars she and Thomas had watched on their journey west. "I never thought I'd be sleeping under them alone," she whispered to her unborn child. The baby stirred in response, a flutter of movement that brought both comfort and fear. Morning brought no mercy. The sun rose like a hammer, beating down on the exposed trail. Sarah had saved her single canteen of water, rationing tiny sips as she resumed her agonizing journey. Her dress, once a practical brown cotton, now bore the earth's stains like a map of her passage. The torn shawl, dragged along with her meager belongings, collected burrs and thorns. Time lost its meaning. Sarah measured progress by landmarks. Twisted juniper, a distinctive boulder, a cluster of wildflowers that reminded her of the ones Thomas had picked for their wedding. She talked to keep herself moving, sometimes to Thomas, sometimes to the baby, sometimes to God. "Just a little further," became her mantra, though she had no clear destination in mind. Near midday, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Hope surged. Briefly, then died as she recognized the riders. Young men from the settlement, probably checking to ensure she was actually leaving. They passed without stopping, though one called back, "Fort Laramie's that way," followed by cruel laughter. Sarah waited until they were out of sight before letting her tears fall. The afternoon brought clouds, but they offered little relief. If anything, the humidity made the air heavier, harder to breathe. Sarah's arms had long since passed the point of pain, settling into a dull, persistent ache. Her torn shawl, now more drag than comfort, became a tool. She would set it as a goal, throw it ahead a few feet, then pull herself toward it. Each small victory kept her moving forward. As the sun began to set again, her body finally betrayed her. A sharp cramp seized her abdomen, and Sarah froze, terror replacing exhaustion. "Not now," she pleaded, one hand pressed against her swollen belly. "Please, little one, not here." The cramp gradually eased, but it left her shaking, aware of how precarious their situation had become. She tried to take stock of her resources in the fading light. The canteen held perhaps a few swallows of water. Her bundle contained a crust of bread, the stopped pocket watch, and a small packet of seeds she'd hidden from the settlement's collectors. Her last connection to the garden she'd tended so carefully. The shawl, despite its tears, would have to serve as bedding again. Night fell faster this time, brought on by the gathering clouds. Sarah managed to drag herself to a slight depression beside the trail, where a large sagebrush offered minimal shelter. As she arranged the torn shawl around herself, the first drops of rain began to fall. Soon it became a steady drizzle, soaking through the worn wool, chilling her to the bone. In the darkness, Sarah's thoughts turned to Thomas. She remembered their last conversation, how he'd made her promise to be strong, to build a good life for their child. "I'm trying, my love," she whispered into the rain. "But I don't know how much longer I can—" Her voice cracked, and she pressed her face into the damp shawl to muffle her sobs. The rain continued through the night. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, her dreams filled with memories of warmth and safety. She saw Thomas standing in their doorway, saw the settlement as it had been when they first arrived, full of promise and welcome. She felt phantom kicks from the baby, each one pulling her back to awareness, reminding her why she had to survive. Dawn brought weak sunlight and the realization that she could go no further. Her arms, pushed far beyond endurance, refused to respond. The drenched shawl hung heavy around her shoulders, as weighted as her spirits. Even the baby seemed quieter, conserving strength. Sarah managed to drag herself a few more feet off the trail, into a patch of morning sun. There, still wrapped in Thomas's last gift, she closed her eyes, praying that someone, anyone, would pass by before it was too late. The sound of approaching hoofbeats came again, but Sarah couldn't summon the energy to look up. If it was the settlement boys returning, let them see what they'd done. If it was death approaching, at least it would end the struggle. Instead, she heard a man's voice, concern cutting through her fading consciousness. "Dear God in heaven, there's someone." "Here?" James Cooper had seen his share of tragedy in his 45 years, but nothing quite like this. The woman lay crumpled beside the trail, her dress caked with mud, a torn shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her swollen belly told him everything. He needed to know about the urgency of the situation. He dismounted quickly, his boots hitting the ground with practiced ease. The silver canteen at his hip, a reminder of his own losses, caught the morning light as he knelt beside her. "Mom," he called softly, noting how her eyes struggled to focus. "Can you hear me?" Sarah managed a weak nod, her parched lips barely moving. James uncapped his canteen, gently lifting her head. "Small sips," he cautioned, helping her drink. The silver canteen had once belonged to his wife, Catherine, before the fever took her 5 years ago. Since then, he'd made it a habit to carry extra water whenever he traveled, a small gesture toward the kindness she'd always embodied. "The baby," Sarah whispered between sips, one hand protectively covering her belly. "Don't worry about anything right now." James's voice was steady, reassuring. He assessed her condition with growing concern. The paralysis was obvious. Her legs lay at unnatural angles, and dirt embedded under her fingernails told the story of how far she'd dragged herself. "I'm James Cooper. I have a ranch about 10 miles east of here. I'm going to help you, but first I need to know, are you running from someone? Is there anyone who might come looking for you?" Sarah's bitter laugh turned into a cough. "Only the people who cast me out." Her voice was barely audible. "Harmony Settlement. They couldn't use a cripple." James's jaw tightened. He'd had dealings with Harmony Settlement before. Their strict interpretations of community value had always struck him as harsh. "Well, their loss will be my gain. I've got a good doctor who visits the ranch regularly and plenty of room." He paused, making sure she understood. "If you'll accept my help, that is." Tears slid down Sarah's dust-streaked face. Why? The question held years of learned suspicion. James touched the silver canteen, a habit he'd developed when making difficult decisions, because it's what decent people do, and because... He hesitated, then continued honestly, because I know what it's like to lose everything. Sometimes survival depends on the kindness of strangers. With infinite care, he wrapped her more securely in the torn shawl. I'm going to lift you onto my horse. It might hurt, and I apologize for that, but we need to get you to shelter. His hands were gentle but sure as he gathered her up, noting how little she weighed despite her pregnancy. Sarah gasped as he lifted her, either from pain or surprise at being handled with such care. James couldn't tell which. He settled her sideways across his saddle, making sure she was secure before mounting behind her. His silver canteen he placed within easy reach. "My things," she protested weakly, looking at the small bundle still lying in the dust. James whistled sharply, and his pack-horse trotted forward. "We'll get them." He leaned down, scooping up her meager possessions. A stopped pocket watch fell from the bundle, and he caught it deftly, tucking it into his vest pocket for safekeeping. The ride to Cooper Ranch was slow and careful. James kept one arm securely around Sarah, offering her sips from the canteen whenever she seemed to flag. He talked quietly as they rode, pointing out landmarks, describing the ranch she'd soon see. His deep voice rumbled soothingly against her back, and gradually she relaxed slightly in his hold. "There it is," he said finally, as they crested a small rise. Below them spread the Cooper Ranch, a sprawling main house painted crisp white, surrounded by well-maintained outbuildings and corrals. A stream wound through green pastures where cattle grazed contentedly. Not much to look at compared to some, but it's home. Sarah's breath caught at the sight. After days of dust and desperation, it looked like paradise. James felt her tension and misread it. "Don't worry. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, has been with me for years. She'll help get you settled. No one here will harm you." As they approached the house, activity erupted. A small Chinese woman, presumably Mrs. Chen, burst from the kitchen door, calling orders in mixed English and Cantonese. Two ranch hands dropped their work and rushed to help. James directed them with quiet authority. "Easy now," he cautioned. As they lifted Sarah from the horse, "Pete, ride for Doc Matthews. Tell him it's urgent." He turned to Mrs. Chen. "The blue guest room, I think. It has the morning sun and a view of the pastures." Sarah found herself being carried into the house, up a broad staircase, and into a room that smelled of lavender and fresh air. The bed was soft, the sheets cool and clean. Mrs. Chen appeared with a basin of water and clean cloths, her efficient hands gentle as she began washing the trail dust from Sarah's face. "Rest now," James said from the doorway. He set his silver canteen on the bedside table. "Keep that close. Doc Matthews will want you drinking plenty. Mrs. Chen will stay with you until he arrives." He started to leave, then turned back. "Oh, and this is yours, I believe." He placed her pocket watch beside the canteen. Sarah stared at the two objects, his silver canteen and her stopped watch, sitting side by side. One representing all she'd lost, the other offering hope she hardly dared accept. "Thank you," she whispered, the words inadequate for the magnitude of his kindness. James smiled, and for the first time Sarah noticed the warmth in his green eyes. "Welcome to Cooper Ranch, Mrs. Miller." Sarah Miller. "Welcome home, Mrs. Miller." He touched his hat brim and was gone, leaving Sarah to wonder at how two simple words could hold such promise. Dr. Matthews arrived as the sun was setting, his weathered face revealing nothing as he examined Sarah. Mrs. Chen hovered nearby, her small hands folded tightly in her apron. When the examination was complete, the doctor's stern expression softened. "The baby is strong," he announced, packing away his instruments. "And the paralysis, while permanent, hasn't affected your upper body strength. With proper care and rest, there's no reason you shouldn't carry to term." He paused, glancing at Mrs. Chen. "Though you'll need help, of course." "She have help," Mrs. Chen stated firmly. "I take care." Over the next few days, Sarah discovered what those words meant. Mrs. Chen was everywhere, bringing light meals, adjusting pillows, helping with the awkward business of personal care. She taught Sarah to use the rope system James had installed above the bed, showing her how to pull herself up, how to shift position to prevent sores. A week after her arrival, Mrs. Chen rolled a wheelchair into the room. "Mr. Cooper order from Cheyenne," she explained, helping Sarah transfer into it. "Now you see ranch." The chair was a marvel of engineering. With large wheels, Sarah could grip herself and smaller ones in front for stability. It took some practice, but soon she was navigating the upper floor of the house, exploring her new world. The blue guest room, her room now, opened onto a small balcony overlooking the corrals. She spent hours there, watching the daily rhythm of ranch life unfold below. James visited every evening, usually carrying some ranch-related item he thought might interest her. On this particular evening, he brought a thick, leather-bound book, its edges gilded with age. "The ranch ledger," he explained, setting it carefully on the table beside her. "Been in use since my father's time." He opened it, revealing columns of neat figures and notes. "I'm afraid I'm not much for bookkeeping." Numbers were always Catherine's specialty. Sarah ran her fingers over the careful entries, noting places where ink had blotted or calculations had been crossed out. "Your wife?" she asked softly, recognizing the name he'd mentioned only once before. James nodded, his eyes distant. 5 years gone now. Fever took her before she could teach me her system." He smiled ruefully. "I do my best, but—" He gestured at the recent entries, where the neat columns had devolved into barely legible scrawls. Without thinking, Sarah reached for the pencil lying beside the ledger. "These calculations here," she said, pointing to a column of feed costs. "If you carry the decimal—" Her quick hands moved across the page, reorganizing the figures with practiced ease. James watched in amazement as she worked. "You understand all this?" Sarah nodded, still focused on the numbers. "I kept the settlement's records before—" She trailed off, but her hands remained steady. "Your operation is larger, but the principles are the same. See here, if you group the expenses by category, patterns emerge. You're paying too much for feed in winter." A slow smile spread across James's face. "Mrs. Miller, would you consider taking over the books? I'd pay you, of course, a fair wage for honest work." Sarah's hands stilled on the ledger's pages. "You'd trust me with your accounts." "I trust what I see," James replied simply. "And I see someone who knows more about business than I ever will." He stood, straightening his vest. "Think about it, no rush to decide." But Sarah had already decided. After the settlement's rejection, after being told she had nothing left to contribute, the leather-bound ledger represented more than just accounts. It was purpose, dignity, a chance to prove her worth. "I'll do it," she said firmly, "though I'll need a desk I can reach from the chair, and perhaps better light." James was already nodding. "Pete's handy with woodworking. He can modify the study desk, and we'll move some lamps in." He headed for the door, then turned back. "Thank you, Mrs. Miller. I have a feeling this is the beginning of something excellent." Over the next few weeks, Sarah threw herself into the work. The ledger became her constant companion as she reorganized years of chaotic bookkeeping. Mrs. Chen brought her meals in the study, clucking disapprovingly when she worked too long, but clearly pleased to see her engaged. The ranch hands, initially awkward around her wheelchair, soon grew accustomed to her presence. They began stopping by with questions about supply orders or wage calculations. Sarah's clear explanations and practical suggestions earned their respect, while her quiet dignity won their loyalty. One morning, as Sarah worked at her modified desk, she heard raised voices from the corral. A cattle buyer was arguing with James about prices, waiving a contract. Without thinking, Sarah wheeled herself onto the study's small porch. "Mr. Cooper," she called, "I believe I have those figures you requested." James glanced up, understanding flooding his face. "Ah, yes. Mrs. Miller, our accountant. Would you share your calculations with Mr. Roberts here?" Sarah smoothly cited feed costs, market trends, and transportation expenses, all meticulously documented. In the leather-bound ledger, the buyer's arguments crumbled in the face of her precise figures. When he finally agreed to James's original price, the ranch hands watching from the fence tried to hide their grins. That evening, James lingered in the study doorway. "That was well done today." Sarah looked up from the ledger, where she was recording. "The sale. The numbers don't lie, Mr. Cooper. Your price was fair." "Indeed." He stepped into the room, his boots quiet on the wooden floor. "You know, you've done more than just organize our accounts. You've given this place something it's been missing since Catherine died, a heart." The compliment hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Sarah felt her cheeks warm as she turned back to the ledger, but her voice was steady. "The ranch has always had a heart, Mr. Cooper. I'm just helping it beat more efficiently." James's low chuckle followed him out the door, and Sarah smiled as she returned to her figures. The leather-bound ledger beneath her hands felt solid, real, like the future she was slowly beginning to believe in again. The morning brought chaos to Cooper Ranch. Sarah heard it first from her balcony: shouts, cursing, and the unmistakable sound of a horse in distress. Wheeling herself to the edge, she saw ranch hands clustered around the training corral, where a magnificent black stallion was fighting the ropes that held him. "He's gonna hurt himself!" Pete called out, trying to approach the panicked animal. The horse reared, hooves slicing air, eyes rolling white with fear. Sarah recognized the signs. She'd seen them before, in horses brought to Thomas for training. Without thinking, she called down, "Stop! You're making it worse!" The authority in her voice cut through the commotion. James, who had just emerged from the barn, looked up at her balcony. "Let him be for a moment," Sarah continued, her hands gripping her wheelchair's arms. "He's fighting because he's frightened. The more you crowd him, the worse it gets." James raised an eyebrow, but gestured for his men to back away. The stallion's frantic movements slowed, though he continued to snort and paw the ground. Sarah studied his behavior, memories of Thomas's lessons flowing back. "Mr. Cooper," she called, "in the main house library, top shelf, there should be a book bound in dark leather with gold lettering. The Gentle Way with Horses, by James Phillis. Could someone bring it to me?" Minutes later, Mrs. Chen appeared with the ancient manual, its pages yellowed with age. Sarah opened it reverently, finding the passage she remembered. "Just as I thought." This was Catherine's book, wasn't it? James, who had come up to the balcony, nodded. She loved horses, always said there was a better way than breaking their spirit. His voice held old grief and something else, curiosity. Sarah ran her fingers over the careful illustrations. "My husband thought the same. He trained horses for our settlement, using methods like these. The key is understanding their nature." She looked up at James. "That stallion down there, he's not mean, he's confused. Everything you're doing feels like an attack to him. And you know a better way?" James's tone was respectful, interested. Sarah nodded, turning pages until she found what she wanted. "Here, first, you need to change the setup, remove those ropes. They're making him feel trapped. Put out fresh hay, just beyond his reach. Let him see it, smell it, but don't force it on him. And—" She hesitated, then continued firmly, "I'd like to go down there if someone could help me." James didn't hesitate. "Pete, bring the wheelchair ramp to the back door." He turned to Sarah. "You're sure about this?" Sarah clutched the manual. "I'm sure. Thomas taught me everything he knew. Just because I can't ride doesn't mean I can't understand horses." Minutes later, Sarah found herself by the corral fence, the ancient training manual open on her lap. The stallion eyed her warily, but his panic had subsided to nervous movement. Following her instructions, the ranch hands had removed the ropes and placed hay at strategic points. "Now," she said softly, "we wait. Let him come to terms with his surroundings." She began reading aloud from the manual, her voice carrying across. "The corral." The stallion's ears flicked toward her, curious about this new sound. "The horse seeks not to disobey, but to understand," she read. "Fear comes from confusion, trust from clarity." She glanced up to find James watching her intently. Catherine marked this passage, she noted, showing him the faded pencil lines. She did, he said quietly. I never understood quite what she meant by it. Over the next hour, Sarah directed a careful dance of patience and subtle pressure. The stallion gradually relaxed, first approaching the hay, then allowing Pete to move closer, always following the manual's guidelines for approach and retreat. By afternoon, the horse was calmly accepting a halter. The ranch hands watched in amazement as the same animal that had nearly killed himself that morning now stood quietly, occasionally nickering softly in Sarah's direction. I'll be damned, Pete muttered, then quickly apologized for his language, but Sarah just smiled. Her fingers tracing the manual's worn cover. It's not magic, she explained. It's just understanding. Every horse has a story, just like every person. Sometimes they just need someone to listen. James crouched beside her wheelchair. Where did you learn all this? Thomas was a horse trainer before we married. He believed in these methods when most thought them foolish. This book, she patted the manual. We had a copy, but it was lost when, she swallowed hard, when they took everything. Then this one is yours now, James said firmly. Catherine would have wanted it used by someone who understands. Sarah looked at him sharply. Mr. Cooper, I couldn't. James, he interrupted. After today, I think you can call me James. He stood, surveying his ranch. And I think we need to make some changes around here. The horse program could use an expert's touch, someone who understands both the business and the training side. Sarah's heart quickened. Are you offering me another job? I'm offering you a partnership of sorts. The books, the horse training, this ranch needs both. And you need, he paused, choosing his words carefully, you need a place where your talents are valued. The manual lay heavy in her lap, its ancient wisdom bridging past and future. Through tears she refused to let fall, Sarah saw the stallion watching her, his trust already given. Behind him, the ranch stretched out, a world of possibilities she'd thought lost forever. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. That evening in her room, Sarah opened the manual to its first page. There, in faded ink, she found an inscription. To my beloved James, remember patience reveals all truths. All my love, Catherine. Below it, in fresher ink, James had added, to Sarah, who reminded us what Catherine always knew. J.C. Sarah traced both inscriptions with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of legacy and promise. Outside her window, the stallion's occasional nickering carried on the evening breeze, a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as challenges, and that wisdom, like hope, never truly dies. It just waits to be rediscovered. The letter arrived with the monthly supply wagon, wrapped in plain brown paper and addressed simply to Cooper Ranch. Mrs. Chen found it while sorting the mail and brought it to Sarah, who was working in the study. The moment she unfolded the coarse paper, her hands began to tremble. You harbor a burden cast out by God's will. The settlement's judgment was clear. Those who aid the unworthy share in their sin. Consider carefully the consequences of your charity. The words were carefully printed, but Sarah recognized the peculiar way the letter Y was formed, Elder Harrison's distinctive handwriting. She had seen it too many times in settlement documents to mistake it. James found her still staring at the letter an hour later. One look at her face had him crossing the room in quick strides. Sarah, what's wrong? She wordlessly handed him the letter. His face darkened as he read, jaw tightening with each line. How dare they? He muttered, then louder. How dare they? They won't let me go, Sarah whispered. Even now they won't just let me live. James crouched beside her wheelchair, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. Listen to me. You're not a burden. You're the best thing that's happened to this ranch in years. Our profits are up, our horses are better trained, and every hand here would stand with you against anyone who says different. As if to emphasize his point, Pete appeared in the doorway. Boss? That new mare's acting up again. Mrs. Miller, could you take a look? He stopped short, sensing the tension. "Everything all right?" James stood, still holding the letter. "Pete, gather the hands. We need to talk." Within the hour, every ranch worker crowded into the study. James read them the letter, his voice tight with controlled anger. The reaction was immediate and fierce. "Them. Settlement folks?" Pete spat on the ground, then quickly apologized to Sarah for the gesture. "Pardon, ma'am, but they ain't got no right. You've done more good here in 3 months than they've done in their whole miserable existence." Mrs. Chen nodded firmly. "We protect our own." "Double the guard rotations," James ordered. "Any stranger approaches, I want to know about it. And when the supply wagon comes back through," he smiled grimly, "I think it's time to renegotiate our trading arrangements." Sarah felt tears threatening. "You'd all do this? Risk their anger for me? Risk?" James's laugh held no humor. "Sarah, you've given this ranch new life, given us all something to be proud of. The settlement." He crumpled the letter. "They're about to learn what real Christian charity looks like." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. From her balcony, she could see the ranch hands patrolling, their lanterns moving like fireflies. In the darkness, the anonymous letter lay on her bedside table, a reminder that her past wasn't finished with her yet. But as she watched the men defending her new home, she felt something shift inside her. The settlement's words, once so powerful, now seemed small against the reality of what she'd built here. Their judgment, once crushing, held no weight against the trust of a difficult stallion or the respect in James's eyes. She picked up the letter one last time, then decisively tore it into tiny pieces. The wind caught them, carrying away the settlements. Threats like autumn leaves. Below, a patrol passed, and she recognized Pete's voice softly singing an old hymn about deliverance. Sarah smiled, remembering different words from the horse training manual. Trust, once earned, becomes its own defense. She had earned this trust with her mind, her skills, and her determination. Let the settlement rage. She was no longer the broken woman they had cast aside. She was home. The pains started during a morning horse training session. Sarah had been demonstrating a new technique to Pete when the cramping seized her so suddenly she gasped. Mrs. Chen, ever watchful, noticed immediately. "Get Mr. Cooper," she ordered Pete, hurrying to Sarah's side, "and send Billy for Dr. Matthews." James arrived just as Mrs. Chen was helping Sarah back to her room. One look at her pale face had him scooping her from the wheelchair, carrying her up the stairs himself. "The doctor's on his way," he assured her, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Dr. Matthews arrived within the hour, his worn leather medical bag clutched in weather-beaten hands. The bag had seen 3 decades of frontier medicine, births, deaths, and everything between. Sarah focused on its scuffed surface as the doctor examined her, trying to read her future in its well-worn creases. "The baby's under stress," Matthews finally announced, pulling a stethoscope from the ancient bag, "and your blood pressure's much too high." He glanced at James, who hadn't left Sarah's side. "She needs complete bed rest. No work, no excitement, nothing that might trigger early labor." "But the horses," Sarah protested weakly. "The ledgers can wait." James cut in firmly. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Everything can wait." Dr. Matthews opened his bag again, removing bottles and packets. "I'm leaving medicine for the pain and to help prevent early labor. Mrs. Chen, you'll need to monitor the doses carefully." He paused, his lined face serious. "The next few weeks are critical. The baby's not ready yet, and in your condition..." He left the rest unsaid. That night, after everyone else had gone, James remained in the chair beside Sarah's bed. The doctor's bag sat on the bedside table, its presence both reassuring and ominous. Sarah watched him watching her, seeing the worry he tried to hide. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm causing so much trouble." James leaned forward, his face catching the lamplight. "Stop that right now. You've given this ranch more than you've ever taken. Let us give something back." "But if something happens..." "Nothing will happen," he interrupted fiercely. Then, softer, I won't lose you, too. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah's heart thundered in her chest, and the baby kicked as if in response. James's hand still held hers, warm and strong and sure. Dr. Matthews's bag remained in Sarah's room for the next 2 weeks, a constant reminder of the precarious balance between hope and fear. Mrs. Chen administered the medicines faithfully, while ranch hands took turns reading to Sarah from the horse training manual, their rough voices stumbling over the formal words. Through it all, James was her anchor. He moved the ranch's business to her room, consulting her on decisions, sharing stories, making her laugh despite her worry. Sometimes she'd catch him staring at the doctor's bag with the same expression he'd worn when speaking of Catherine, raw fear masked by determined hope. Gradually, the cramping subsided. Dr. Matthews's visits became less frequent, though his bag remained just in case. Sarah's color improved, and the baby's movements grew stronger, more purposeful. "You're both fighters," the doctor declared during one checkup, patting his faithful bag, "though I'll rest easier when the little one decides to arrive properly in due time." That evening, Sarah noticed James eyeing the medical bag with less apprehension. "It's going to be all right," she said softly. "We're going to be all right." He turned to her, something unspoken in his gaze. "Yes," he agreed quietly. "We are." His emphasis on the word "we" made her breath catch. The doctor's bag stayed in her room until the day she was finally allowed to return to light duties. She'd come to see it as more than just a container of medicines. It was a symbol of how much these people cared, how far they'd go to protect her and her child. As Mrs. Chen carried it back to the doctor's waiting buggy, Sarah watched from her balcony, one hand resting on her growing belly. The crisis had passed, but it had left something precious in its wake, the certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Sarah sat at her modified desk, spreading out the carefully drawn breeding charts she'd spent weeks preparing. Each page detailed bloodlines, temperaments, and training success rates of the ranch's horses. Colors coded each category: red for speed, blue for temperament, green for endurance. The documents represented more than just plans. They were a vision for the ranch's future. James stood behind her chair, studying the intricate diagrams. "You've matched every mare to a specific stallion, based on their strengths," Sarah explained, touching each color-coded section. "See here, by breeding lightning speed with Rose's calm temperament, we could produce foals that are both fast and manageable. The army's always looking for horses like that." She pulled out another document, this one showing projected profits. "If we implement this program, within 3 years we could double our horse trading income. The initial investment is high, but—" "Do it," James interrupted. "Whatever you need." Sarah twisted in her chair to look up at him. "Just like that, without reviewing the costs?" His smile was warm. "Sarah, your last 3 innovations have increased our profits by 30%. The new feed storage system alone saved us enough to buy 2 new stallions. I trust your judgment." The breeding program documents trembled slightly in her hands. Trust. Such a simple word for something so profound. "I've also been thinking about expanding the training program," she said carefully, "teaching others the gentle methods." James pulled up a chair, settling beside her. "Go on." Sarah revealed another sheet from her stack of documents. "We could offer training courses, not just for horses, but for other ranchers' handlers. The methods in Catherine's book." She paused, watching his reaction to his late wife's name. When he nodded encouragingly, she continued, "They're not widely known. We could change that. And charge for the knowledge," James added, understanding lighting his eyes. "Sarah, you're brilliant." She blushed, shuffling the papers. "It's just impractical thinking. The settlement—" She hesitated, then pressed on. "They taught me to see value in everything. I'm just applying it differently now." James's hand covered hers, stilling their nervous movement over the documents. "You're doing more than that. You're creating something new, something important." A knock at the door interrupted them. Pete stood there, holding his hat. "Sorry to disturb you, but that new army captain's here early. Wants to see the horses." "We're offering." Sarah quickly gathered her breeding documents. "Send him to the South Corral. The ones we've trained with the new methods are there." She glanced at James. "Would you mind if I—" "Lead the way," he said, moving to take the handles of her wheelchair. "I want to watch you show this military man what real horse training looks like." The demonstration exceeded even Sarah's hopes. The captain watched in amazement as horses responded to quiet commands, moving through complex maneuvers without resistance. When she explained how their new breeding program would produce even better results, he immediately placed an order for 20 horses, double what they'd expected. That evening, Sarah added the army contract to her growing stack of breeding program documents. Each page represented a piece of the future she was building, not just for herself, but for the ranch that had become her home. Mrs. Chen brought her tea, pausing to admire the neat stacks of papers. "You make ranch strong," she said simply. "Make everyone proud." Sarah touched the documents, feeling the weight of possibility in each carefully planned page. "The ranch made me strong first," she replied softly. "I'm just returning the favor." Later, she found a note slipped between her breeding charts, written in James's strong hand. "Catherine always said this place needed someone who could see its full potential. She would have been proud to know you're the one who finally did." Sarah held the note against her heart, feeling her baby kick as if in agreement. The breeding program documents surrounding her were more than plans now. They were proof that broken things could be rebuilt, that cast-off dreams could find new soil to grow in. She had lost one home, but in creating these new possibilities, she had built another, stronger, better, and entirely her own. The autumn morning brought dust. Clouds on the horizon, riders approaching from the direction of Harmony Settlement. Sarah watched from her balcony as Elder Harrison led the small delegation into the ranch yard, his polished walking stick catching the sunlight. That stick had always been his symbol of authority, rapping sharply on the meeting house floor during judgments. James met them in the yard, his stance casual but alert. Pete and two other hands casually moved closer, rifles within easy reach. Sarah wheeled herself to the top of the entrance ramp, where she could see and hear everything. "Cooper." Elder Harrison's greeting was cold. He leaned on his walking stick, its brass head gleaming. "We've come about the woman." "Mrs. Miller?" James's voice carried clearly. "What about her?" "She belongs to our settlement. We've come to reclaim." "Her." A laugh escaped Sarah's lips, not frightened this time, but genuinely amused. All heads turned toward her. "Reclaim me," she called down, "like lost property?" Elder Harrison's face tightened. "You were given into our care and cast out of it," Sarah interrupted, wheeling forward. The morning sun warmed her face, and she felt her baby move, strengthening her resolve. "You left me to die by the roadside. We had no choice. The settlement cannot support." "Cannot support what, Elder Harrison?" "Someone who maintains your accounts, trains your horses, teaches your children." Each question landed like a blow. "Or just someone who makes you uncomfortable by surviving?" The elder's knuckles whitened on his walking stick. "You dare judge us after we took you in?" "No, Elder. I'm not judging. I'm succeeding." Sarah gestured at the prosperous ranch around them. "Everything you said I couldn't do, I'm doing it. Everything you said I'd never be, I've become it." James moved to stand beside her wheelchair, his presence solid and reassuring. "I believe we're done here," he said quietly. "We are not done." Elder Harrison raised his walking stick, pointing it at Sarah like an accusation. "That child she carries belongs to our settlement. By our laws, your laws," James's voice turned dangerous. "Your laws left a pregnant woman to crawl through dust. Your laws nearly killed both her and her unborn child. And now you dare come here to my ranch, speaking of rights?" The elder's delegation shifted uncomfortably. Sarah recognized most of them. Men who had once smiled at her, women who had shared her table. Now they couldn't meet her eyes. "Tell me," she said softly. How are your horses doing? I hear Wild Bill's stallion injured 3 more people. And your harvest accounts. Did you ever figure out why the numbers didn't balance? She smiled gently. I could help with that, you know, for a consulting fee. A shocked murmur ran through the delegation. Elder Harrison's walking stick trembled slightly. You would mock us? No, Elder. I'm offering you a business opportunity. Because that's what I am now, a businesswoman, one who's helped triple this ranch's profits in 6 months. She met his gaze steadily. The settlement needs what I can offer. The only question is whether your pride will let you accept it. The silence stretched. Then, surprisingly, one of the younger women spoke up. She's right, Elder. We've lost money since she left, and the horses... Elder Harrison's walking stick struck the ground sharply, but the damage was done. The delegation's united front had cracked. Think about it, Sarah said into the awkward silence. My rates are very reasonable, and unlike some, I don't judge those I do business with. James's soft chuckle beside her carried across the yard. One by one, the delegation members began to smile, first tentatively, then with growing warmth. Only Elder Harrison remained stone-faced, his walking stick now looking less like a symbol of authority and more like something he needed just to stand. We'll consider your offer, he managed finally, turning his horse. As the delegation rode away, Sarah noticed the elder's once proud walking stick bouncing loosely in its saddle holster, no longer pointing at anyone, no longer pronouncing judgment. Just a piece of polished wood, its power broken by something stronger, the quiet authority of a woman who had rebuilt herself from nothing. That, James said admiringly, was better than any horse training I've ever seen. Sarah watched the dust. Clouds fade. Sometimes, she said softly. The hardest thing to gentle isn't a horse. It's the past. The leather harness arrived from Cheyenne, wrapped in brown paper and possibility. Sarah ran her fingers over the carefully crafted straps and buckles, designed specifically to help someone with her condition ride safely. James watched from the doorway as she examined every detail of the adaptive equipment. The saddle maker had never made anything like it before, he said. But he was intrigued by the challenge, said he consulted with 3 doctors to get it right. Sarah touched the special braces that would secure her legs. How did you even know such a thing was possible? I didn't. James moved into the room, pulling up his usual chair beside her. But I knew you missed riding, and I remembered something you said about adaptation being better than surrender. The equipment represented more than just a chance to ride again. It was freedom, independence, a bridge between her past and future. When can we try it? James grinned. Pete's already saddling Sugar. She's the gentlest mare we have, and you trained her yourself. Mrs. Chen appeared with a shawl. Air getting cool. You need wrap warm. Her tone allowed no argument, though her eyes sparkled with excitement. The whole ranch seemed to gather at the corral. Pete held Sugar steady while James and Mrs. Chen helped Sarah with the harness. Each strap was adjusted. Carefully, the buckles checked and double-checked. Sarah's heart pounded as James lifted her from the wheelchair. Ready? He asked softly. She nodded, unable to speak. The leather of the adaptive equipment creaked as James placed her in the specially modified saddle. For a moment, panic fluttered. In her chest, she hadn't been this high off the ground since the accident. Then Sugar turned her head, nickering softly, and calm washed over Sarah. She remembers you, Pete said, grinning. Horses never forget a kind hand. The adaptive equipment worked perfectly, holding her securely while allowing enough movement to guide the horse. Sarah gathered the reins, muscle memory flooding back. Walk on, she commanded gently, and Sugar stepped forward. The first circle of the corral brought tears to her eyes. The second brought laughter. By the third, she was sitting straight and proud, directing Sugar with the lightest touch. The mare responded perfectly, as if they'd never been apart. Look at you, James called softly. You're magnificent. Sarah felt magnificent. The adaptive equipment that had seemed so foreign minutes ago now felt like a natural extension of herself. It didn't erase her disability. Nothing could do that. but it gave her back a piece of who she'd been while honoring who she'd become. "Think, you're ready to try the paddock?" James asked. At her nod, Pete opened the corral gate. The larger space brought new challenges. The equipment creaked as Sarah adjusted to different gates, different terrains. But Sugar seemed to understand the importance of smooth movements, picking her way carefully across the paddock. Near the fence, Sarah noticed movement. Several of the settlement's young riders had gathered to watch. Instead of the pity or scorn she might have once expected, she saw admiration in their faces. One girl waved shyly, and Sarah waved back. "Mrs. Miller," the girl called, Could you teach us to ride like you do? Not with the special saddle, but the gentle way." Sarah looked at James, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd be happy to," she replied, "though you'll have to convince your elders to pay for lessons." "Oh, they will," another youngster piped up. "Elder Harrison's wife said so. She said we need to learn from the best, and that's you." The compliment warmed her more than any summer sun. Sarah patted Sugar's neck, feeling the mare's solid strength beneath her. The adaptive equipment held her securely as she turned to face her future students. "Well then," she said, "Lesson 1 begins now. Watch how Sugar and I work together. It's not about control, it's about partnership." As she demonstrated basic techniques, Sarah felt the baby move, as if responding to the gentle rhythm of the horse's gait. This child would grow up knowing both strength and gentleness, would learn that adaptation wasn't weakness, but wisdom. Later, as James helped her back into her wheelchair, she kept one hand on the adaptive equipment. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing this was possible." "Sarah," he replied softly, "with you, anything is possible." The storm came without warning, rolling across the prairie like God's own fury. Sarah watched from her window as the massive oak tree that had stood sentinel over Cooper Ranch for generations swayed in the violent wind. That tree had been her first landmark when James brought her here, a symbol of strength and permanence. "The horses," she said suddenly, wheeling toward the door. "The new foals are still in the lower pasture." James caught her chair before she could exit. "Pete and the hands are already heading out. You need to stay safe." A brilliant flash of lightning illuminated the yard, followed instantly by deafening thunder. The great oak's branches thrashed against the darkened sky. Below, Sarah could see the hands struggling through the wind toward the pasture. "They don't know which foals spook at lightning," she insisted. "I've been working with them. I know their triggers, their safe spots." James knelt beside her wheelchair, his face grave. "Sarah, you're 8 months pregnant. I can't risk." "Then come with me." She gripped his hand. "The breeding barn has my notes on each horse. We can coordinate from there, direct the hands. Please, James, those foals are our future." Something in her voice, the hour perhaps, made him nod. Together they made their way to the breeding barn, Sarah clutching her document case of horse records, while James shielded her from the worst of the wind. The oak tree groaned above them as another lightning bolt split the sky. Sarah began calling out instructions the moment they reached the barn. "Thunder spooks at light, but follows his mother. Dawn's foal hides in thickets. Check the south grove." The hands, already drenched, responded to her clear commands. One by one the foals were located and herded toward safety. Through it all, the ancient oak stood guard, its massive form visible in each lightning flash. Then came the sound, a crack like the world splitting open. Sarah looked up in time to see lightning strike the great oak, sending blazing branches crashing toward the barn roof. "Move!" James shouted, pushing her wheelchair forward as burning wood crashed behind them. They reached the far end of the barn, just as part of the roof caved in. "The records!" Sarah cried, realizing she'd dropped her document case. "Forget them." James pulled her chair back as more debris fell. "Pete, get the horses clear." Through the chaos, Sarah heard frightened whinnies from the pasture. Despite the hands' efforts, some foals were breaking away, panicked by the burning oak's crash. "Dawn's foal!" she gasped. "He'll run for the thicket. It'll be on fire from the lightning." James was already moving, pulling her chair toward the Barn's side door. Tell me where. Guide me to him. Together they pushed through the storm, Sarah calling directions as James maneuvered her chair across the muddy ground. The burning oak lit their way with an eerie glow, its centuries-old strength now feeding the flames that threatened everything they'd built. They found Dawn's foal exactly where Sarah predicted, trembling beneath burning branches. James left Sarah's side just long enough to grab the young horse's lead rope, using the gentle techniques she'd taught him to calm the frightened animal. The storm raged through the night. Sarah coordinated rescue efforts from the relative safety of the bunkhouse, sending hands to check every horse, every building. Through it all, the burning oak stood like a torch against the darkness, its destruction illuminating their struggle. Dawn finally broke over a changed landscape. The great oak, now a blackened giant, had fallen away from the main buildings, its mighty crown shattered. But thanks to Sarah's knowledge and the hand's swift action, not a single horse was lost. James found her staring at the fallen tree. "We saved what mattered," he said softly. Sarah nodded, thinking of how the oak's flame had lit their way to Dawn's foal. "Sometimes," she replied, "something has to fall so new things can grow." She touched her belly, feeling the baby move. The oak protected this ranch one last time by showing us how strong we are together. James's hand covered hers. "I think I finally understand what Catherine meant when she said this place needed a heart to match its spirit." He turned Sarah's chair to face him, his eyes intense. "She meant you." The evening after the storm found Sarah and James in the study, a hand-carved chess set between them. The set had been Catherine's, each piece lovingly shaped by her father, a master woodworker. Sarah's fingers traced the elegant queen, admiring the subtle details that made each piece unique. "Catherine taught me to play," James said softly, moving his knight. "Said a rancher needs to think 3 moves ahead," Sarah countered with her bishop, a smile touching her lips. "And do you think ahead?" "More lately than I used to." His eyes met hers across the board. "The storm made me realize something, Sarah. Watching you coordinate everything, seeing how everyone naturally followed your lead, it reminded me of Catherine's favorite chess lesson, which was..." Sarah's hand hovered over a pawn. "The queen is the most powerful piece on the board." James caught her fingers gently. "The king can't survive without her." The carved pieces blurred as tears filled Sarah's eyes. "James, let me finish." His grip tightened slightly. "When Catherine died, I thought this ranch would just be a business. Something to maintain, nothing more. Then you arrived, and suddenly everything had purpose again. You didn't just fix our accounts or train our horses, you gave us back our heart." Sarah looked down at the chess set, at the pieces arranged in their eternal dance of strategy and sacrifice. "I was broken when I came here," she whispered. "No." James's voice was firm. "You were wounded, but never broken. You proved that every day, with every achievement, every innovation, you rebuilt yourself, and in doing so, you rebuilt this ranch into something better than it's ever been." The carved queen felt warm in Sarah's palm, as if generations of careful touches had imbued it with life. "I've been afraid," she admitted, "afraid to hope for more than safety. Afraid to admit that somewhere between the ledgers and the horse, training and the storm, I fell in love with more than just this ranch." James stood, moving around the chess table to kneel beside her wheelchair. "Sarah Miller, I've been falling in love with you since the day you reorganized our entire breeding program. I just didn't know how to say it without frightening you away." A laugh bubbled up through Sarah's tears. "You couldn't frighten me away if you tried. Not now. Not ever. Then marry me." The words hung in the air, simple and profound as the carved chess pieces watching their game unfold. Sarah stared at James, seeing the hope and fear mingled in his eyes. "The baby," she started, "will be mine in every way that matters." James took both her hands in his. "I know I'm not Thomas, and I'd never try to replace him in your heart. But I think there's room there for a different kind of love, the kind that grows slowly, built On respect and understanding and shared purpose, Sarah looked at the chess set, thinking of Catherine's lessons living on through its carved surface. "And you're sure? About taking on a wife who needs a wheelchair, who can't do everything a rancher's wife traditionally does?" "Sarah," James's voice held a touch of exasperation, "you do more from that wheelchair than most people do on two legs. You've transformed this ranch, earned the respect of every hand, and shown more courage than anyone I've ever known. The only tradition I care about is building a life with someone I love and admire, someone who makes me better just by being who she is." Sarah picked up the carved queen again, remembering Catherine's father shaping it with such care. Like the piece, love could be carved slowly, thoughtfully, until it became something both beautiful and enduring. "Yes," she said simply. James's smile lit the room brighter than the storm-driven lightning had. He leaned forward to kiss her, gentle and sure, like a promise carved in wood and sealed in heart. When they finally broke apart, Sarah laughed softly. "You know what this means? The settlement elders will have to accept me now. No choice. They accepted you the moment you showed them true strength." James reset the chess pieces, the carved army standing ready for their next game. "Now, shall we practice thinking 3 moves ahead? We have a wedding to plan, after all." Sarah moved her first pawn, feeling the weight of the carved piece and the future it represented settle into place. "I already am, my love. I already am." The women from Harmony Settlement arrived on a crisp autumn morning, carrying something large wrapped in muslin. Sarah recognized them from her balcony. Margaret, the midwife, Elder Harrison's wife Rebecca, and young Mary, who had once been her star pupil. Their faces held a mixture of shame and hope. Mrs. Chen met them at the door, protective as always. "Miss Sarah resting. Doctor's orders." "Please." Margaret stepped forward. "We've brought something. A peace offering." Sarah wheeled herself to the doorway. "It's all right, Mrs. Chen. I'll see them in the parlor." The women followed her, their bundle handled with careful reverence. When they unwrapped it, Sarah's breath caught. Before her lay a masterwork quilting piece, its patterns telling the story of her journey. Each square had been lovingly crafted. By different hands, she recognized the stitching styles of nearly every woman in the settlement. "We started it the day after you left," Margaret explained softly. "At first it was meant as a remembrance, a reminder of our shame. But then we heard how you were thriving at Cooper Ranch, and it became something else. A celebration." Sarah touched the intricate patterns. Here was a square showing a woman teaching children, there another depicting horses running free. The central panel showed a wheelchair beside a ranch house, with a tree that could only be the fallen oak standing, proud behind it. "Every woman in the settlement contributed," Rebecca said, her fingers tracing a border pattern. "Even those who voted to cast you out. Especially those. We were wrong, Sarah. We've watched everything you've built here," Mary added. "The breeding program, the training school, the settlement's horses are healthier since we started following your methods. Our books finally balance properly." Sarah studied the quilt's careful stitching, seeing the hours of work, the silent prayers for forgiveness sewn into every seam. "It's beautiful," she said finally. "But why now?" Margaret stepped forward, her weathered hands clasping Sarah's. "Because you're with child, and no baby should come into this world carrying the weight of old grievances. Because you proved us wrong in the most gracious way possible, by succeeding without bitterness. And because," she glanced at the others, "because we miss you." "The settlement needs you," Rebecca admitted. "Not as a member who must prove her worth, but as a respected business partner, someone who can teach us to be better than we were." Sarah wheeled herself closer to the quilt, noting how the patterns flowed together, joining past and present. "And Elder Harrison, does he share your views?" The women exchanged glances. "He's learning," Rebecca said carefully. "The success of your horse training program has opened many eyes, including his." "Besides," Mary added with a hint of her old mischief. "Once you marry Mr. Cooper, you'll be the most influential rancher's wife in the territory. Even Elder Harrison understands the value of mending fences." Sarah laughed, despite herself. "So, it's politics now, is it?" "It's survival," Margaret corrected gently. "You taught us that, Sarah. Adaptation is stronger than rigid principle. The settlement must change or fade away. We'd rather change and learn from the one who showed us how." Touching the quilt again, Sarah felt the layers of meaning in its patterns. Like her own journey, it had begun in sorrow but transformed into something rich and complex. Each stitch represented a small step toward understanding, just as her own daily efforts had gradually built a new life. "The wedding is in 3 weeks," she said finally. "I trust you'll all attend?" The relief in the room was palpable. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "You'd want us there, after everything." "The past is sewn into this quilt," Sarah replied, running her hand along the beautiful handiwork. "But it's not the whole pattern. There's room for new stitches, new designs." She smiled at her former neighbors, now potential friends. "Besides, I need someone to help Mrs. Chen with the wedding preparations. She's convinced no one knows how to properly celebrate such an occasion." The laughter that followed was healing, a tension breaking like threads snapping after too much strain. As the women gathered around to discuss wedding plans, Sarah kept one hand on the peace-offering quilt. Its patterns reminded her that life, like quilting, was about joining broken pieces into something stronger and more beautiful than before. The first pains came during the pre-wedding dinner, as Sarah sat fingering the cameo brooch Margaret had brought her. "It was your mother's," the midwife had explained. "Found in the settlement's storage after. I've been saving it for this moment." The carved ivory piece showed a mother and child, their profiles delicate against the dark background. Sarah's mother had worn it every Sunday, a tradition spanning generations. Now, as the initial cramping seized her, Sarah clutched the cameo tightly. "James," she whispered, interrupting his conversation with the ranch hands. One look at her face had him signaling Margaret. "How far apart?" the midwife asked, immediately professional. "Just started," Sarah managed, though another pain suggested otherwise. "But something feels different." Margaret's examination confirmed her suspicion. "This baby's not waiting for any wedding. Mrs. Chen, we need hot water and clean linens. Mr. Cooper, send someone for Dr. Matthews." The ranch erupted into controlled chaos. Pete rode for the doctor, while Mrs. Chen transformed Sarah's room into a birthing chamber. James carried Sarah upstairs himself, refusing to let anyone else help. "I'm sorry," Sarah gasped as he settled her on the bed. "The wedding can wait." He kissed her forehead. "This is more important." Sarah gripped her mother's cameo as another. Contraction hit. The carved faces seemed to watch her with generations of feminine wisdom, reminding her that women had done this since time began. Margaret shooed James from the room, but not before he pressed something into Sarah's free hand. "Catherine's, carved queen from the chess set. She'll watch over you too," he whispered. Hours blurred together. Sarah drifted between present pain and past memories, the cameo cool against her palm. She thought of her mother, of Catherine, of all the women who had faced this threshold between what was and what would be. Through her window, she could hear activity in the ranch yard. Horses nickered, doors opened and closed, voices murmured. The whole ranch held its breath with her, waiting. "The settlement women are here," Mrs. Chen announced during a brief respite between pains. "They bring food, extra hands." Sarah nodded, too focused on her body's demands to speak. The cameo pressed into her palm, its carved figures a reminder that she wasn't alone, not in body or spirit. Dr. Matthews arrived as the moon rose, his bag rattling with instruments. "Breach," he announced after examining her. "But don't worry, between Margaret and me we've handled worse." Sarah's world narrowed to pain and purpose, punctuated by gentle encouragement from Margaret and Mrs. Chen. The cameo stayed clutched in her hand, its smooth surface worn warm by her grip. "Your mother had the same determination," Margaret murmured, wiping Sarah's brow. "She wore that cameo when you were born." Outside, Sarah heard James pacing the hallway. Occasionally his shadow crossed her door, a silent guardian. The ranch hands had gathered downstairs, Pete's guitar softly playing hymns. "The whole territory's holding vigil," Mrs. Chen reported during a quiet moment. "Settlement folks, ranch hands, even that army captain who buys your horses, all waiting to hear." Sarah touched the cameo's carved profiles. So many people, when once she'd thought herself alone. So much love, when once she'd known only judgment. "The baby's turning," Dr. Matthews announced near midnight. "Nature's doing what we couldn't. One more push, Mrs. Miller. Show us that strength that built this ranch." Sarah gripped the cameo tighter, feeling the carved mother and child press into her skin. All the generations before her seemed to gather close, lending their strength. Catherine's spirit, Thomas's memory, her own mother's love, all flowing through that simple piece of ivory. "Now!" Margaret commanded, and Sarah pushed with everything she had. The baby's first cry pierced the night like a revelation. Outside, cheers erupted from the waiting crowd. Sarah heard James's voice rise above them all. "That's my girl! That's my Sarah!" Dr. Matthews laid the squalling infant on her chest. "A daughter," he announced proudly. "Strong and perfect." Sarah looked down at her child, then at the cameo still clutched in her hand. The carved mother and child smiled. Their eternal smile, welcoming one more generation to their endless dance of love and renewal. As dawn broke over Cooper Ranch, James entered Sarah's room carrying a small silver box. His eyes were wet as he took in the sight of her nursing their daughter. "I've been waiting for the right moment to give you this," he said softly, placing the box beside her. Sarah opened it one-handed, careful not to disturb the nursing baby. Inside lay a silver rattle, its handle worn smooth by generations of tiny hands. Delicate engravings covered its surface, horses running free, stars scattered like dreams. "It was Catherine's as a baby," James explained. "Before that, her grandmother's. She made me promise," he paused, collecting himself. "She made me promise it would go to our child someday. I think she'd be pleased to know it's going to your daughter instead." "Our daughter," Sarah corrected gently. "What shall we name her?" James touched the silver rattle, then the baby's downy head. "I was thinking Catherine Thomas Cooper, Cat for short." To honor both those who brought us here, tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks as she nodded. The baby, Cat, chose that moment to release her meal and yawn, tiny fingers flexing toward the morning light. James carefully placed the silver rattle in those searching fingers, and a new sound joined the ranch's morning chorus, the delicate chiming of ancient silver blessing a new generation. Mrs. Chen appeared with breakfast and news. Whole ranch still celebrating. Settlement women cook enough for army. Everyone wants see baby. Let them come, Sarah said, surprising herself. This joy should be shared. They came in small groups throughout the morning. Ranch hands removed their hats and spoke in whispers, each offering a small gift, a whittled horse, a tiny quilt, a handwritten blessing. The settlement women brought traditional gifts, hand-sewn clothes, preserved fruits, promises of future help. Pete had organized the hands to build a cradle, its wood carved with the same running horses that graced the silver rattle. Figured she should dream of horses, he said gruffly, being as they brought her parents together and all. Even Elder Harrison's wife came, carrying a pot of honey. For sweetness in life, she explained, then added softly, and to remember that even bitter things can become sweet with time. Through it all, Cat gripped her silver rattle, its gentle music accompanying each visitor's blessing. When she slept, the rattle rested beside her, its worn surface catching sunlight like promises. She's got your determination, Margaret observed, watching Cat grip the rattle firmly, even in sleep. And James's gentle heart. You can see it already. Sarah touched the silver rattle, feeling its years of history. She'll have everything I didn't, she whispered, a home that can't be taken. A way, a family that extends beyond blood, a community that values strength in all its forms. She'll have more than that, James said from the doorway. He crossed to them, his cattleman's grace somehow softer now. She'll have your example, a mother who showed an entire territory that true worth isn't in what you can or can't do, but in who you choose to be. The baby stirred, setting the rattle chiming. Outside a horse nickered as if in response, and Sarah smiled. She'll have the ranch too, the horses, the land, the legacy we're building. Speaking of building, James settled beside them. The army captain sent word. He wants to double his order for trained horses, but only if you'll personally oversee their preparation. Says no one else gets quite the same results. Sarah laughed softly. He'll have to wait a few weeks. I have more important things to manage right now. As if agreeing, Kat waved her rattle, its silver song merging with the ranch's afternoon sounds. Horses in the corral, hands calling to each other, settlement women singing as they prepared meals for the celebrating household. Listen, James said, his voice warm with wonder. That's the sound of everything you built. The ranch, the community, the bridges between past and future. Sarah held her daughter closer, feeling the silver rattle's cool touch against her arm. No, she corrected gently. It's the sound of everything we're still building, together. Kat's rattle chimed once more, blessing the moment like a prayer. 2 weeks after Kat's birth, James asked Sarah to join him in the study. The evening sun painted the room gold, catching on a small velvet box he held. Sarah recognized it from the few times she'd seen him open his strongbox, Catherine's family jewelry case. I know we've already agreed to marry, he began, his voice unusually hesitant, but I never did this properly. He opened the box, revealing a gold ring set with 3 diamonds. This ring has been in Catherine's family for 4 generations. Each woman who wore it added her own story to its legacy. Sarah watched as he lifted the ring, its facets throwing rainbows across the study walls. The first diamond, he explained, was set by Catherine's great-grandmother, a pioneer who crossed the Oregon Trail. The second came from her grandmother, who built the first schoolhouse in her settlement. The third was Catherine's mother's, added when she helped her husband establish their ranch. He took Sarah's hand, the ring hovering above her finger. Catherine wore it proudly, adding her own story of building this ranch into something special. Now, he paused, emotion thickening his voice. Now it needs a new chapter, a story of remarkable courage, of rebuilding from ashes, of showing us all what true strength looks like. Sarah touched the ring gently. Are you sure? This is your family's history. You are my family, James replied firmly. You and Kat, and this ring story isn't finished. Look inside. He tilted the ring so she could see a fresh engraving on the inner band, a tiny horse and a wheelchair, artfully intertwined. Because some love stories write themselves in unexpected ways, he explained. Tears blurred Sarah's vision as James slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. The 3 diamonds caught the evening. Light, each one representing a woman who had faced her own challenges, built her own legacy. There's more, James said softly. He drew out a document from his desk, a deed to the ranch. I want to put your name on this. Equal partner, equal owner. Everything we build here, we build together. Sarah stared at the deed, then at the ring. James, this is too much. It's not enough. He knelt beside her wheelchair. Sarah Miller, you came here broken in body, but unbroken in spirit. You took a struggling ranch and transformed it into something extraordinary. You showed an entire community the meaning of true worth. You've given me a daughter, a future, and a love I never thought I'd find again. He touched the ring on her finger. Will you marry me? Properly this time, with all the ceremony you deserve? Sarah looked at the ring, thinking of all the women who had worn it before her. Pioneer women, builder women, women who had faced their own impossible challenges. Now, their strength seemed to flow through the gold band, joining with her own. Yes, she whispered. Yes to everything, the ring, the ranch, the future, all of it. From the next room, Kat's cry rose, followed by Mrs. Chen's soft singing. The ranch's evening sounds drifted through the window. Horses settling for the night, hands calling good night, the distant lowing of cattle. All of it familiar now, all of it home. When? James asked, still holding her hand. Soon, Sarah decided. While Kat's still small enough to sleep through her own parents' wedding. She smiled. And before the spring foaling season, we'll have our hands full then with the new breeding program? James laughed, pulling her into a kiss. Always practical, my love. Always thinking ahead. I learned from the best. Sarah touched the ring. All these women, they must have planned and dreamed too. Built their futures piece by piece. And now you'll add your story to theirs. James helped her wheel over to the window. The setting, sun lit the ranch in golden fire, promising tomorrow's dawn. Though I'd say you've already written quite a chapter. Sarah watched a group of hands leading horses in for the night, their movements following the gentle methods she'd taught them. In the distance, the settlement spire caught the last sunlight, everything connected, everything growing. No, she said softly, feeling the ring's weight of history and hope. We're just getting started. 1 year later, Sarah sat in her study, Kat sleeping peacefully in a cradle beside her desk. The ranch deed lay before her, now bearing both Cooper names in firm black ink. Through the window she could see the spring breaking over their land in truth and law and love. Where the lightning-struck oak had stood, a young sapling now reached toward the sky, planted on her wedding day. Around it, the ranch flourished. New foals dozed in the spring sun, their bloodlines carefully documented in her breeding logs. The training school had expanded, drawing students from 3 territories, eager to learn her gentle methods. The settlement had changed too. Their horses now grazed alongside Cooper Ranch stock, their books balanced under her occasional guidance. Elder Harrison had even enrolled his grandson in her training program, admitting finally that some changes were worth embracing. James appeared in the doorway, holding fresh coffee. Thinking deep thoughts, Mrs. Cooper? Sarah touched the deed, smiling at how natural her new name looked beside his. Thinking about journeys, about how sometimes the worst moment of your life can lead you to the best. He set the coffee beside her and lifted Kat, who stirred but didn't wake. Speaking of journeys, Pete says that new mare you've been working with is ready for the adaptive saddle. Good. Sarah wheeled away from the desk, pausing to straighten the deed, this paper that represented not just property, but possibility. Then it's time to show our daughter how her mama rides. Together they moved to the window. Below, the ranch spread out like a promise kept, each acre telling its own story of redemption, renewal, and love that saw beyond circumstance to the heart of what mattered. Sarah touched her wedding ring, feeling the weight of all the strong women who had worn it before her. Then she touched the deed, testament to all she had built since being cast out with nothing but her own determination. Ready? James asked softly. Sarah smiled, hearing in that single word all the questions and answers of their shared life. Always, she replied, always ready for the next chapter.